Well, now, that's a nice router. You know, using that router makes me have a hankering for some chowder. And I was thinking, you know, the only way I'm going to catch me a haddock is if I had me a hook. And so I got to thinking of the old bench hook. I did. And I'm Roy Underhill, and I'm at the Lie-Nielsen Tool Works, and we were thinking about bench hooks the other day. So we're going to take a look at this style of bench hook. Now, the one you probably know is this style. It's much broader, this L-shaped plank here, and it's brilliant. You can sit here or stand up and put your hand against it there and start a tenon cut. You can plane, you can do the ends, you can do all kinds of work with the wonderful bench hook. So here I'll just kind of zip out the grain to make a little tenon on the end, a little rabbit. There we are. And zip, zip, zippity-doo. All right. So this works great. It holds the wood, but I think it doesn't look much like a hook. It looks, what's the thing? Why is it called a bench hook? Well, this is perhaps an older style. This does look like a hook. In fact, it hooks one on the other. You can just hook them together, and they just go up forever. So this is a different style of bench hook that you can use in the same way. Put them up against the bench here, and we can slide into it again. We can saw, we can do all that wonderful work that we do with the other kind of bench hook. But this will also let you work with long pieces. So this is great. You can separate these and work with a long piece, and we can get down here and work. And a piece, 6, 12 feet long, doesn't matter. They'll come apart, and we can work it on down just like that. All right, so it's great. But wait, there's more. We noticed that we didn't have, we were going to do a whole lot of mortising, and that we did not have the benches yet bored for holdfasts. So this is, of course, the other use for these kind of bench hooks. Set them in the front face vise, set it right over the wood, grab it up, and then hit it here, and it holds the wood down like a holdfast. So here we are, it's held now, and we can do our mortising lickety-split. So you can start in and just work along, chopping that mortise with the wood held steady and still, using the front vise and our bench hook held thusly. All right, so let's go ahead and make one. So the heavy wood, dense wood, something really strong, 2.5 inches broad, 1.5 inches thick, and perhaps a foot long. And here I've got one. All right, so here we are, exactly that. 1.5 inches thick, 2.5 broad, foot long. We're going to come in 2 inches on each end to do the hook. Now I've got one side laid out here. Here it is. All right. So we'll go ahead and take 2 inches in from one side and find that point. And let's go 2.5 inches in on the other side. Find that point. All right. And then we'll come down, say, 3/4 of the way on this line. And then again, 3/4 of the way on this line. Now we're only going to use half the thickness of the wood when we get to it. But there you go. So we don't go all the way across because we don't get confused, which is really easy to do. Now I'm going to come down half the thickness of the wood, and the way I find it, of course, is set this gauge with the tooth to what looks like half, come in from one side, then come in from the other side. In the middle of those two very close lines is where I want to go for the center. Here we are again, half in from one side, half in from the other side, and that's our center point. So now we're going to draw the long line, and I've got a long stick here handily. I've got to check and make sure it coincides with the side I've already drawn. Go from that halfway point, 2 inches from one end, and draw all the way to the corner up here. So you draw all the way from this point to this point. Now this one's going to go from here to here, and that's what's going to make that zig. And it also adds another feature. Because we went at 90 degrees, when we did this first line here. This first line was at 90 degrees, a right angle to the surface. Now we've dropped the intersecting line down this way. That makes this kind of a hook. This angle in here is 1 or 2 degrees tighter than 90 degrees, so it really does hook into the wood. All right, that's easy now, I guess. We've got all that done. I'm going to square across the face, and you can see here on the other side, I've got the same design laid out. And now we got to get rid of all that wood. So how would you do that? We can take a rip saw and rip down the length of it. Now that's ripping through 2.5 inches of maple, and that's fine. It's all right. But you can also do it with a lot of cross cuts. So I'm going to set this up here for just that technique. So obviously I don't have much to say if we're going to rip down to the end. The only thing I would say is, well, you probably do want to do this stop cut first, because it would be bad if you split this end off by twisting the rip saw as you're working. But instead, what I'm going to do is do a whole bunch of cross cuts here. I'm going to turn it the other way, though. I'm going to turn it like this. All right, and start a bunch of cross cuts. So I'll start with the one down here. There we are. Get it in that front vise. And right across. And square down from the surface. But it won't be square when we finish putting the ramp onto it. So I'll do this one very carefully, watching to stop when I get to the line. As in most things, it's not the sawing that's important, as is the stopping sawing. So here we go. So work along. This is some very clear, hard maple. White oak would be real good. Beech, very dense wood. If, however, you have wood with knots in it, fear not, because what you need to do in that case is simply make sure you cut right on the knot. So the more you can cut that knot into little pieces, the easier it'll go. All right, so I've got a bunch more of these to do, so here we go. All right, it's as fun as it looks. All right. Whew. All right, that's all the cross cuts. Now, we're going to go down the grain, just splitting all these chunks away. All right. So start at the end. Right on down. All right, so now get over on this side. You see, I've got the bevel down, so they're just splitting out all the way down. You want to be careful on that last cut. Be careful on the last cut, not to knock the end off here. All right, so that worked pretty well down one side. I'll work the other side and then come down the middle. And again, having the bevel down against the wood makes for better control. Better control. This is probably a good time to mention the one secret that will guarantee your woodworking is flawless and as good as it can possibly be. And it's simply this. And that will make it just right every time. All right. So you got that. Now, of course, if you're also very careful to always take the apple will come out just right. So there we are. All right. So that's down with it all roughed out. We've still got our depth line. So now this comes a little more tedious. We want to put our bevel down and start working. Let me see if I can do a little bit of bevel down work here. Yeah. So just tuning this up now. And I've seen folks work standing this on the side and splitting down the side of the grain. You just got to watch the grain and see what's happening here. In fact, at the start of the layout, it'd be really good to watch your grain and make sure that you're not going to be going against the grain on these ramps by some choice that could have been made easily the other way. Now I'm going to come down with the edge of the chisel and just bring down to the final line. So then I know, there you go, I've got a kind of a depth guide on both sides that I don't have to see, but I can feel because I've got the chisel going all the way to the line. There we go. All right. So now this is a good point to go to the plane. I'm going to see if we have a, do we have any planes here? Do we have any planes? Ah, okay. Here's a plane. I've got a nice number 4, and I'll work this down up here. But of course, this can't get all the way down to the end. We can't go all the way up to that shoulder, nor do we want to hit the shoulder and knock the hook off the end of our bench hook. And we would have a hookless bench hook. So this is working fine, bringing this end down. Very nice. I think I cut a little too deep. All right, now this bottom end, look at this. You can do this with a paring chisel, holding it flat on the wood and letting the paring chisel is so thin that you can slide it on the wood and just shear down. Maybe get yourself a little bit of diagonal action going. All right, so this takes a little while to get this cleared away. This is using a chisel pushing it along. Now, wouldn't it be nice if there was such a thing as a chisel plane? Something that would hold the chisel at just the right incline that it could come right up to that shoulder. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, there is such a thing. I've never used one before, but here it is. It's a chisel plane. So it's got the iron sitting way out front and working along with a very fine cut. We can smooth right up to the little hook shoulder there because this has nothing in front of the iron. We just work right along on the diagonal. All right, well, this is going to take a little bit here, so I'm going to fiddle with this until I can get it smooth. So here we go. All right, now, so I'm finishing up here. A little bit of scraper action. Main thing is that this thing is level enough that your wood on it is not going to be rocking about, because the whole point is that this holds it flat and steady on the bench. All right, there we go. Now, so that's it, except for one very important thing. Remember, this other use we have for these bench hooks is to hold for mortising. And that strike that we do puts a lot of strain on that little 2 inches of grain that could shear. So we have this end beveled off so that when we strike it down, we're not going to run a crack right down there. So that's the final thing. We've got to employ that lost art of paring. And hence we have our paring chisel. And here we are. All right. So I'm going to round off this square end starting with my dividers. I've got a pair of dividers. Like, you know how a cutting gauge is different than a regular gauge, a common gauge? Well, this is a cutting compass, cutting dividers. They are sharp on one leg like a knife, and you can see how that just cuts right into the grain. So I've got a really nice start for the roundosity here on that side. We'll do the other side, and then we'll run some lines across, and then we'll be ready for the paring. So this kind of compass with the cutting foot really helps out. And doing a little arc like this, or a big arc like when you're doing arch top panels or something like that. So I'll run a guide line across the face. All right. And there's one. guideline on that face, and then a guideline down the end grain, and just having something to look at when you know when to stop. So there we are. Now paring, this is a paring chisel, so thin. It also, oddly, you use it in the most crude manner. You're using it like, et tu brute kind of thing. So a stabbing motion, but you don't stab with it, you push with your chest. So this is held against your chest. The other end, the business end, you hold between your two fingers like that, with the other fingers resting on the wood. So you see how those can steer, and this has a huge amount of force coming down. So it's kind of like one of those old mortising machines, foot lever, that simply push the chisel straight down in a controlled cut. So here we go with a shear across the grain. So this is cross grain paring, kind of a lost technique. You don't see people doing this as much as they used to. But then again, people don't make bench hooks as much as they used to, and that's why we're all special, right? All right, so I'm gonna finish this up, paring down, paring across the grain. We can then go after this with the block plane, smooth it up as much as we want, but you can do whatever you want, put holes in it to hang it up. Here's the final thing though, just a reminder of how these bench hooks work. You can take them on the bench and work with small stock like that. You can even work in the middle between these two. And what really pays off is you can take a long timber like this one. Now this is only a short one, but one day last week up here in Maine at the Lie-Nielsen Tool Works, well, the fog rolled in and I was working on this 6-foot long bench and I noticed though with my 12-foot timber I was able to keep on planing the full 12 feet well supported. Turns out at the end, I had been planing 6 feet out on top of the fog. So thanks a lot, I'm Roy Underhill, so long.